Hey, what's up guys? Julio here. And in today's video, we will be finishing up the Travelex website. So this is going to be part 4 and the final part. So if you're just watching this video for the first time, please make sure that you start with part 1 first. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you that if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on bell notifications. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. Also, check out my social media account and check out my Patreon. Patreon allows fans of the YouTube channel to contribute a monthly sum to show their support while also receiving exclusive perks. All the links are going to be in the description below. Now, let's jump right in. In the last video, we finished working on the special offer section. In this video tutorial, we will continue by finishing off the featured room section, the contact form, as well as the footer, and then we'll make everything responsive. So let's start by scrolling down to the end of the HTML file. And here we want to locate the offer section and then the closing tag. So underneath, we will open up another section tag, and this one is going to have the class of rooms. Inside of it, we want to reuse the container div. Then we also want to reuse the heading. Before we continue even further, let me just scroll all the way down so that you can see what's going on. If you remember correctly, we used an h5 with the class of section head. Then inside of it, we had a span with the class of heading. And this will simply just say luxurious hotels. Actually not hotels, but affordable rooms. So for that, we will use another span, and this one is going to have the class of subheading. And in this one, we will say affordable rooms. Just like so. And since we are reusing the HTML markup and the styles from the other section heading, it means that we don't have to do any other additional styling here. The next step is going to be creating the grid. So for that, we will reuse the grid that we used for this section up here, but we will also add modifying classes so that we can change certain things. So let's have a div with the class of grid, and we will have an additional class for the modifier, which is going to be rooms grid. Again, since we are reusing this class from before, we will also have a grid item, and then we want to have an additional class to modify it of featured rooms, just like so. Now what we have to do is create a wrapper div for the image, for the hotel room image. So let's do that. It's going to have a class of image wrap. And then in here, what I want to do is have an image. The image is going to point to the images folder, and then we want to find the image called room 1, which is going to be this one. And something that we also want to do is apply a class to this image tag. So let's take care of that. And it's simply going to be the class of room image. Just like so. And now we can see the image. Underneath, what we want to do is have a heading. So for that, we will reuse the h5 with the class of room name. And then this one will be for the Astro Hotel. Now we want to exit out of this div, so we are going to go underneath, and what we will do here is just have some additional information as far as the pricing, and a brief description of the room, and an anchor tag that's going to say book now. But we want to use Flexbox for alignment purposes, so we will wrap this with a div. And that div is going to have the class of room info wrap. As I mentioned, we are going to have a price, So for that, we will use a span with the class of room price. And for this one, I'll just do, it can be anything, but I'll do 200. Then I want an additional span in front of this so that I can have so that I'm able to select the text that is going to be inside of the per night text, and we can have different styles. So the span is going to have the class of per night, and then inside of it, it's simply just going to say per night, just like so. Now what I want to do next is go underneath of this domain span, and we are going to have some text. So for that, we will use a p tag with the class of paragraph. And here we just simply want to have some dummy text. So I'm going to generate some lorem ipsum. And this is actually a lot of text. So let me just cut this out. And maybe we'll just have like a little bit just like this. And then finally, we will go underneath of the p tag, and we will have an anchor tag with the class of btn, because we want to reuse those btn styles, but we also want a modifying class of rooms btn, so that we can style it differently from the other buttons. And that's not going to point anywhere. Finally, the text is just simply going to say book now. And then we will use the little arrow, and for that we will just use the HTML special characters of rar. And this should actually just be 1R, just like so. And if we scroll all the way down, we should be able to see it right here. For the time being, we can't see it really well. It's actually there, but it's blending in with the color, so we can't actually see it. So what we are going to do now is basically copy this entire grid item and paste it down below, because every single other item that we will have in here is going to be exactly the same. The only thing that we have to do is just modify the text. And to keep this simple, I'm only going to be doing 4 rooms. I know in the demo I had about 10, but like I said, you can just copy this and paste it below as many times as you want. So let's just copy this, find the closing tag, which is right here, and then we will just have 1, 2, actually that's the third one. This one is going to be 4. So now all we can do is just simply modify the text. So the first one had room 1. For the second one, we can do room 2. Then we can do room 3. And then finally, we can do room 4. So let's check that out. It looks pretty good. The names of the hotels, they're still the same. But again, for this demo, it doesn't really matter. You can change this text to be anything that you want. I want to keep everything simple, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The next step is going to be styling this and making it look pretty. So join me inside of the CSS file. Now that we are inside of the CSS file, what we will be doing is scrolling all the way down to the last styles that we wrote. So that would be the one for the special offer right here. And just like we've been doing before, we will have a comment just to make finding everything easier. So this one is going to be rooms section styles. And then we'll just simply comment that out. Now what I want to do here is target the rooms section. And what I want to do here is just simply apply a different background color, which is going to be a borderline white transitioning into gray. So background color, and then it's going to have the following hex values of F2, and then once more F6, and then finally F9. Now underneath, what we will be doing is targeting this image wrap div that we have here containing the image. And what we will do is say image wrap, and I want to give it a position of relative. And you'll see why that comes into play later, because again, I will be using the before and after pseudo elements to create some effects. Then what I want to do is just limit the height. So the height is going to be 25 rem, just like so. And it kind of looks messed up now, but don't worry about it. It's going to be fixed as things go along. Then I'm going to target the image wrap after. And we want to make sure that we set the content, else it's not going to show up. Then the position is going to be set to absolute, and starting top is going to be 0, starting left will be 0 as well. Now we will set the width to be 100% of its parent, as well as the height. Then we will set the background color of the purple transparent alt. So for that we will use the variable, just like so. And that's going to be it. Now we have the overlay on the image. But as you can see, it still doesn't look all that great. But don't worry, like I said, we'll be taking care of that shortly. So the way that we take care of that is by targeting the image itself. So it's going to be the, what did I call it again? I think it was room image, actually. Room image, just like so. And here we just simply wanted to take 100% of the width, 100% of the height, and then we will use object fit of cover. And now it's just going to fit everything a lot nicer, just like so. The next step is to actually style the room name. So let's take care of that. Room name. And here we want to increase the font size to 2.6 rem, just like so. And it should be font size, not weight. Then what we will do is set a background color of yellow. So for that, we will use the variable again, so background color. Then we'll use the bar of yellow. And that's going to be the solid, just like so. What we will be doing now is setting the color inside of it to white, so that we can have better contrast. Then we will set some padding top and bottom. Padding top and bottom is going to be 0.5 rem, and then left and right is going to be 2 rem, just like so. Now we are going to set the position to be absolute because we want to move it around. Then the left is always going to be starting at 0, and then for the bottom we want to set it to 2.5 rem, just like so, so that we can move it up here. And notice that now the text here in the background thing is actually behind the overlay. But for that, we can just simply use the C index so that we can move it on top of it. And for that, we can just do a high value of something like 10. And once we take care of that, the next step is actually going to be styling the price that we have here per night. So that's also going to be pretty simple. Since this is a span, what we will do is make it a block element, since by default it's a inline. So again, room price, display of block, and now it's going to take 100% of the available width it has. The font size is going to be 3.6 rem, just so that we can have it be a lot bigger. I also want to increase the font weight. So let's make that bold so that stands out more. And then we want to make the color to be yellow. Actually, not yellow. Let me just double check. I don't know if I had it at black or yellow. And yes, actually it seems like I had it at yellow. So font actually should be the color. Bar, it's going to be the yellow solid. Just like so. And finally, what I want to do now is style the per night. So let's target that, which is going to be the other span inside of it. And what I want to do here is set my color to be different from this price, which is going to be black. And that's why I got kind of confused, because I remember there being some black color, but then I remember that it was just separately done with the spans. So the color, it's going to be the variable that we used, which is going to be dark color. And then what we will do here is just set the font size to be a lot smaller. So for that, we will do 1.4 rem. And then what I'll do here is set the font weight to be a lot lighter. So I'll set it to 100. Just like so. What I want to do now is style the BTN that we have right here. We can kind of barely see it now because of the darker grayish color that we have, but that's still not enough. So let's target that. So that's going to be the room's BTN. And that's going to have a color of dark again. And it's also going to have a padding set to 0. And the reason for that is because if you remember from before, the general styles for the BTN has some padding by default, so I want to remove it. Then what I'll do here is just simply set a transition on the color when we hover. So transition, color, and then over 0.5 seconds. And now we will create the hover effect. So rooms BTN and hover. And then what we want to do here is just simply change the color to yellow. And now if we go ahead and hover over it, you see that we get a nice transition. And this is going to be basically it for this section. So the next section is going to be for the contact form. But before we move along, let me show you that it's still technically responsive right out of the box, just like so. But yeah, like I said before, now we are going to be working on the contact form. So join me inside of the HTML file. Now that we are back inside of the HTML file, what we will do is locate the closing tag for the room section, which is this one right here, before the closing main tag. And then we'll just create a space here, and now we'll open up another section, and this one is going to have the class of contact. Once more, we will keep reusing the container div. And the heading as well. So as opposed to just copying this over again, let's just make our lives a lot easier by just copying it from here and pasting it here, and then just changing the text. So here we simply just want to say contact, and then for the subheading, we'll just say something like get in touch with us. So if I scroll down, you can already see that it looks great right out the box. The next step is going to be creating a wrapper div, which is going to be for the image as well as the form, which is going to come in handy because we will be using Flexbox for the alignment. So underneath of the H5, what we want to do is have a div with the class of contact content. And here we will have a div with the class of traveler wrap. And this is just going to be a wrapper for the image. The image inside of it is going to be inside of the images folder, and it's called traveler.png, which is this one right here. Now what we want to do is go underneath of this traveler wrap div, and we will set up the form. So the form is going to have the class of form, and it's also going to have an additional class of contact form, just like so. And then the action is, it can be left empty since this isn't going to be functional for now. And what we will do in here is just create a div with the class of input group wrap. Again, this is just going to come in handy when we do all the alignment later on. Inside of this input group wrap, what we want to do is have an input group. And in here we will have an input which is going to be of type text. And for the rest of the things, we want to have the class of input, which is something that I should have done right away with emit. But for now, the placeholder is just simply going to be name. Then what we will do is have a span underneath it. And we will be using this span to create the line when we focus inside of it. And it's going to have the class of bar. And then underneath of this input group, we want to have another input group. So it's going to be exactly the same. So we can just go ahead and copy this one, paste it down below, and now we can just slightly modify it. So this one is going to say email inside of the placeholder. And what we want to do here is just change the type to be email. And you can also play around with the required fields if you wanted to, which doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, if you were to make this functional, you also want to do the validation with JavaScript and with whatever backend language you decide to use as well. So now that we have that out of the way, we need, let me just scroll down so that we can see the inputs that we have here. And since this is a class that we already used before on the other form, you can see that we already have some general styles here. We also need an input field for the subject. So let's basically grab this again, paste it down below, and then this one can just be set back to text. Input, and then it's just going to say subject. And the next one is going to be for the text area so that we can have the message, a place where we can type in the message. So again, I already copied this, so I can just paste it down below. And what we have to do here is actually change this input to be text area, just like so. And then for the type, it's not really going to have one, so we can just get rid of it. The class is still going to be input, but we want to add some columns as well as some rows. So right here, what we will be doing is setting a column. So this is going to be 30. And then we also want to set some rows. And this one we can just do 8. Just like so. So we have an issue with the span here. Element span is not allowed here. Let me see what the issue here is. So let me just make this bigger. So input group. Oh, that's because the text area actually requires a closing tag, whereas the input right here doesn't. So now if we paste back the span in, you see that we have no issues. Now the only thing that we need is a button. So that's going to be pretty simple as well. What we have to do is just simply come down here underneath of the last input group. And what we will be doing is actually, let me just double check something right here. So we had the input group wrap, which is this one right here. And let me just, so I made a mistake here. Actually, I wanted the input group wrap to only be here for these two input groups, because later on we are going to change the layout when we make this responsive. So go here to the second input group, and underneath it we will add a closing tag for this input group wrap that we have. And now before the closing tag for the form, we can just simply get rid of this closing div tag because it no longer has anything to close. So if you didn't understand what I did right there, please make sure that you rewind the video if you need more time so that you can go over it again. Again, I was supposed to just do it for the first two because I will be changing how they look later on when I do the media queries. Now back to the button. So underneath of the last input group, what I want to do is have a button. The button is going to have the type of submit, and it's also going to have the class of btn, which is something that we are reusing. It will have the class of form btn, and it will have the class of btn purple. And then for the text, it's just simply going to say send message. Let me actually just make this capital. And then we want to also reuse the dots here. So for that, we used span, and it had the class of dots. And then inside of it, we had an icon from Font Awesome with the following classes. Just like so. And this is going to be it for the contact form instead. The next, for the contact form in general. So the next step is going to be styling this to make it look a lot better, because as you can see, it looks pretty bad. So join me inside of the style sheet. Now that we are back inside of the style sheet, we will continue to do what we have been doing all throughout this project, and that is creating a reference comment. So this one is going to be for the contact section styles. Now we just simply comment that out. So the first thing that I want to do here is basically make a display of flex on the contact content. So display of flex. Then what I want to do next is set my justify content here to be of center. Now what I'll do is say that the traveler wrap is not going to be visible here on smaller screens. So we are going to get rid of this image. So traveler wrap, and we'll say display none. Just like so, so that we only have the form itself. Now let's continue by styling the form. So contact form, and it's going to have a width of 100% now, so that it stretches all the way, just like so. Then I'm going to change the background color to be of the gradient color. So for that, we'll say background image, bar, and then gradient color, just like so. But as you can see, it kind of looks weird, but that's because the inputs have a color of their own, a background color, so it's kind of like an overlay. but don't worry, we'll be taking care of that shortly. Something else that I want to do here is apply some padding all around, and that's going to be 2.5 rem. Now underneath, I'm going to target the inputs inside of the contact form. So contact form, input, and I want to make them to be a display of block. Then what I'll do here is change the background color to be transparent. So now we can see through them. We also want to change the color to be white so that they're more visible. The font weight will be set back to normal. And then what I want to do now is add a border bottom of 2 pixels. And it's going to have the color of white. Finally, I want them to have a padding left of 0. So now it's going to be a little bit to the left, just like you saw. Now underneath of this rule, I want to target the bar of the span that I had before. So bar, and I want to make this a display of block. And I also want to set the position to be relative, because I will be using before and after pseudo elements to basically draw the line when we focus in. So that's going to be pretty simple. And it's actually a technique that we've used before on other tutorials. So bar after, we'll set the content so that we can see it. Then we'll say that the position will be set to absolute. Starting at the left is going to be here set to 0. And then the bottom is going to be 0 as well. Now I'm going to set a width of 100%, and the height will be 3 pixels. Then I'm going to set a background color, which is going to be the color of the purple light. And as you can see, we now have this pseudo element after on top of the border of the white border that we had initially. So then what we have to do is just hide the pseudo element, and then we can just animate it in when we focus inside of the inputs. So what we have to do now is set the transform scale X to 0, and that's going to get rid of it. Then I'm going to set a transition on the transform. Over 2.5 seconds. Then I'm going to select the contact form, then the input inside of it, and I want to say that on focus, and then I'll use the plus. So basically what I'm doing is saying that when the input is focused, I want to find the next element sibling, and what I want to do is set the following styles. So it's going to be on the bar. Bar before, I mean after. And what I want to say here is say that the transform scale X is going to be set back to 1. And now if we test that out, you'll see that we get the line here. But we have an issue because it's going from the middle. So we can fix that by going back here, and we can set the transform origin to be from the left. Just like so. So now it's going to grow from the left. And again, to just recap what we did here, we selected the input inside of it, of the contact form, and then when we use the pseudo class of focus, then we use the next, basically we select the next element in line, which is this span with the class of bar we have right here, and we set the following styles, which is going to be the scale that we had before on the after pseudo elements from 0 to 1, and that just makes the line grow. Then what I want to do is work on the footer. because as you can see, the contact section is already finished. So join me inside of the HTML file. So once inside the index.html, let's locate the closing tag for the main. And now we want to open up the footer tag with the class of footer. Once more, we will reuse the container div. And then what we will use in here is basically that we will group the two sections that we have inside of the footer, and then we will use flexbox for alignment. So for that, we are going to have a div with the class of footer content. Then inside of that, we also want to further group the content that we had with the logo as well as a brief description. So let's have a div inside of there with the class of footer content brand. And here we simply just want to have the anchor tag that we used before for the logo. So anchor tag with the class of logo, and then it's just simply going to point back to the index.html. And inside of it, we will have the image, and we will find it inside of the images folder, and it's going to have the name of logo.png. And we also want to apply a class to this. So let's actually do it here. And if I remember correctly, the class was logo image, just like so. Let me scroll down just to see how that looks. And right here, it looks great, but we can't see the text because it's blending in with the background. Underneath of this logo, we will use the p tag again with the class of paragraph. And we are simply just going to have some dummy text. And that's actually like too much, so let me just cut it up a little bit. And now I'm going to go outside of this footer content brand div, and I'm going to have a div for the social media items. So this div is going to have the class of social media wrap. And here I'm going to have an h4, and it's going to have the class of footer heading. And it's going to say follow us. Then underneath it, I'm going to have a div with the class of social media. And then here, I'm just going to have several anchor tags that I will be using as opposed to a list. So the anchor tag is going to have the class of SM link. So short for social media link. And as far as the href, it's not going to go anywhere. And then in here, we want to have an icon from Font Awesome. And this one is going to have the class of FAB, FA, and then Twitter. Just like so. Now for the other icons, since they're going to be the same except for the icon itself, I'm just going to copy and paste it several more times. And now I can just go ahead and change the secondary Font Awesome class. So this one is going to be Facebook, and then square. Then the third one is going to be for Instagram. The fourth one is going to be for Pinterest. And then the last one is going to be for TripAdvisor. And that's going to be it for the footer section. The next step is going to be going inside of the style sheet so that we can make it look a lot better. So join me there. So for this particular section of the CSS, what we will do is finish up the footer, and then we'll continue with the media query so that we can make the website completely responsive. So just like before, let's start with a reference comment. Then I'm going to select the footer. The footer will have some padding of 5 rem top and bottom, and then 0 left and right. Now I'm going to apply a background color, which is going to be the variable for the solid purple. Next, I'm going to apply a color of white. And for the time being, you're only going to see this color reflect on the follow us and social media icons, but that's because here we have the paragraph class that we have reused before, which means that it's going to be using this color we have right here. So we'll be changing that shortly. But before we get to that, let me actually select the footer content brand. And what I'll do here is just apply some margin bottom of 5 rem, and that's going to create some separation between this div, container div, and the social media section. Now I'm going to select the footer content. Actually, just do the footer and then the paragraph inside of it, and I'm going to change the color to be inherited. So now it's going to inherit this white color that we have here. The next thing that I want to do is select the footer heading. Footer heading, and I should be using a class, footer heading. And here I just want to add a text transform of uppercase, and then I'm going to add a little bit of margin bottom, 2.5 rem, to create some separation between the heading and the social media icons. Now I'm going to be selecting the social media, and I'm going to give it a display of flex. Now I'm going to select each individual link, and I'm going to give it a width and height, and that's because I want to make it so that it's round later on and with a border. Then we'll use a little bit more of the flex box so that we can center the icons inside of this box container. So the width is going to be 4 rem, and the height will be 4 rem as well. Now I'm going to set a border, which is going to be 2 pixels, and it's going to be solid, and we'll use the variable for the yellow, just like so. What we are going to be doing now is applying a border radius of 50% just so that it makes it round. Then I'm going to say that the display will be a flex. But we're not going to use align items or justify content to align them. That's because we can do it in one line later on by selecting the icon itself and giving it a margin of auto. But let me just add a margin right to create a bit of separation, and for that I'll do 1 rem. Then I'm going to transition the background color because we will also be applying a background effect here on hover. So let's take care of that. Transition will be on the background color, and it will be over 0.5 seconds. And something that I want to do is also increase the font size. So let me actually do it up here. And I'll do for 2 rem instead, just like so. So now I'm going to create the hover effect for the link, which is going to be pretty simple. So SM link hover, and then we simply just want to add the same background color that we had for the border, which is going to be the yellow. So now when we hover over it, it's going to transition nicely, just like so. Something else that we want to do is change the color of white to dark so that it has better contrast. So let's add that in. So we'll say that the color is going to be the dark one. And now you can see that it looks a lot better. The only thing we have to do now is just center the icons in the middle of the box, or in this case, the circle. And that's going to be pretty simple. All we have to do is say SM link I. So we select every single icon inside of it, and then we just do a margin of auto. And that's going to allow us to center it perfectly in the middle just because we used this display of flex here on the parent. And as you can see, it already looks a lot better. And this is going to conclude the CSS for the footer in the mobile view. Now we're going to be moving to the media queries, but before we move, I actually want to add the effect where this right here is going to become a purple solid once we start scrolling. So let's take care of that. And to do so, we have to scroll all the way back up to the header styles. And should be right here. And what we want to do is select the header again. And we also want to target the header when it has an additional class of active, which we will add later on with JavaScript. And we just simply want to change the background color to be the purple solid. Just like so. So to take care of that, we have to go now inside of the JavaScript file, and this is going to be pretty easy. So let's go right here. And what I'll do here is select the window object. So window, and then I'm going to add an event listener, and it will be of scroll. Then we will have a function, and in here what we want to do is say that we want to grab the window position. So let me actually just create a variable, and I'm going to call it window position. Window position, and I'm going to be having a conditional here that we will be storing inside of this window position variable, and we will be using it later on to toggle the color on and off. So this is going to work kind of like an if statement, except that we will be placing it inside of a variable instead. And what we want to do is just grab the window y, and actually window dot scroll y. Yeah, I should just type it in, but I'm too lazy. And once we grab the window scroll y, we want to compare it so that it's greater than 0. And this could be any value you want. If you wanted to start changing the color right after the moment we scroll, that's fine. Then you do 0. If you wanted to maybe change at 100, 500, so it would be like around here, then you could do so as well. And then you can track the scroll position so that it changes to solid once it exits the header as well, if that's what you wanted. But for me, I'm going to leave it at 0. So what we want to do now is say that the header, we want to toggle the class list. So class list toggle. And a lot of people don't know that you can actually have a conditional here as well, aside from just toggling a class. So that's what we're going to do. First, you pass in the class that you want to toggle, which it's going to be the class of active, which we added to the header here. And basically, this would be the exact same thing. So here, it would be kind of like an if statement, and we have the conditional. So when we scroll, you'll see that it's going to change. But before this actually takes effect, I'm going to have to refresh this. So now you see that it changes to the solid color. And if we go back to the top, it's going to go to the transparent one. But I just wanted to show you that it's going to be exactly the same. But I think that it looks a lot cleaner if you just use a variable, which is going to be the window position. And if I debug this again, you'll see that it still works the exact same way as it did before. So that's going to wrap up the JavaScript portion for this entire site. Let's go back to the media queries within the CSS so that we can make the website fully responsive. And we're going to scroll all the way down, and we will start with the header. So the first breakpoint is going to be at 768 pixels. So let's create a comment for the media queries. and we want to say add media and then screen, and we still have a few more things. We want to say and then we use the min width because this was a mobile first. If it was a desktop first approach, then you would use the max width. And this is going to be at 768 pixels as I mentioned. And here I'm going to change the height of the header, which will be 10 rem now. And for the time being, we can't see it, but let me actually make this slightly bigger just so that we know when it's taking effect and we can see the styles just like so. The next thing, actually, just to keep it consistent, let me also use comments here as well. So header section styles. Just so that we can keep them grouped like we did before. Then what I want to do is change the height for the header to be different once we have the active class as well. So header active, and should also be a class. And we'll say that the height here is going to be 6 rem. But that's because I want it to be a different width. For example, right here, when I start scrolling, it's going to shrink just like so. Then what I want to do here is select the other styles for the hero section. So let me just create a comment. And for this one, I'm going to say that the title will have a font size of 8 rem. Just so that we can make it bigger. Now I'm going to target the contact section. So let's scroll all the way down for that, which would be right here. So another comment, contact section styles. Let me just actually give myself some more room to work with. And now here I'm going to select the contact content, and I will give it the justify content of space between. And for the time being, you're not going to be able to see anything, but that's because it's only going to be taking effect when we have the image side by side. So I'm going basically doing by the cascading styles, so doing these styles first and then whatever continues next. But just so that you guys can see later on what this is actually doing, I'll comment this out for now. What I'll do now is select the traveler wrap. And I'm going to make it visible by doing a display of block, just like so. What I want to do now is limit how big this particular traveler wrap div actually gets. So for that, I'm going to use flex, the shorthand for flex, and then I'm going to give the first value 0, and then 0 as well, which is going to be for the flex grow, flex shrink, and so on. And then finally here, 45%. And a shorthand, if you actually wanted them to be exactly the same size, you could just do a flex of 1. But in this case, I want this particular section right here for the traveler wrap to be slightly smaller. So right here, for the shorthand of flex, I'm using 45%. And as you can see, it even gives you like a little bit of explanation. You have the flex grow, you have the flex shrink, and then the flex spaces, which is going to be this one. Then what I'm going to do is actually select the traveler wrap image, and then I'll do 100% so that it shrinks a little bit more, adjusting to the height and width of the actual parent. And as you can see, it already looks a lot better. Now I'm going to select the contact form, and I'm going to do the exact same thing here with the flex. And that's going to have a flex again of 0, 0, and then this one will be 50. Just like so. And now you see that we have some more room to work with on the sides. So if I go back here to the contact and I comment this out, we're going to get a little bit of space between for separation, just like so. Something else that I want to do is align this form right here to the top. When this one gets on a bigger screen, and then we're going to be making this a little bit smaller. So for that, I'm going to say that I want to align self, and then it's going to be flex start. What I want to do now is select the input group wrap. And that's going to be pretty simple. I just want to make it so that it's flexed because I want to separate, basically have these two side by side, and then I'll spread them evenly here with some space in between it. So flex wrap. And what did I call this? I believe it was input group. And actually input group wrap. And I'm going to give it a display of flex. And now you see that they're both side by side. But it doesn't quite look great because it just looks like one line. We'll have to create a little bit of separation here. And we can easily do that by just setting the width. So we can do input group wrap, and then we want to select the two inputs inside of it, the input groups, and then we'll just simply give it a width of 50%. Just like so. We still don't see any changes, but we will once we add the margin right, which is going to be of 2 rem. And just like so, you see that right here we have a little bit of separation. But if you take a look here, it doesn't actually spread all the way, but that's because this also has a little bit of margin right, which we have to get rid of it by using the nth child for the last one. Or in this case, we could just do last child. So let's just actually select this one, duplicate it below, and then we'll just say last child. And now we can just get rid of the margin right by making it 0. And that's going to fix the little issue that we had right here. It already looks great. The next thing that we have to do is select the footer, and then we'll do some things here as well to make it more look better on bigger screens, which will have this side by side. So again, let's create a reference comment. And the first thing I'll do here is select the footer content. And it will have a display of flex. So now it's going to be side by side. Just like so. And then I'm going to justify content space between. And for the time being, you're not going to see anything, but in a bit, we're going to have a little bit more separation. What I'll do now is use the same trick we used before with the flex spaces. So before we actually move along, let me get rid of the margin that we had added before. And that's going to be on the brand. So footer content brand. We'll get rid of the margin, I believe it was margin bottom. And then we'll set that to 0. And then I'm going to say that the flex will be 0 here, 0 as well. And then for the basis, it's going to be, let me do something like 60%. Just like so. Now I'm going to select the footer paragraph. And I'm only going to get rid of well, not actually, I'm not going to get rid of it, but I'm going to be adding a margin top. So footer content and then margin top, 2.5 rem, and that's just going to push it up a little bit. And then what I'm going to be doing is selecting the footer heading, and this is going to have, and this should be one line, not two separate ones. And what I'm going to do here is say that the margin bottom is going to be 5 rem. And that's just going to push it a little bit, just enough so that it kind of lines up with the paragraph we have right here. Finally, we are going to select the social media wrap. And then we'll just use the same flex that we used before for the controlling the width. And should be the shorthand. And what we will do here is just 0, 0, and then we'll set it to 40%. Just like so. And now I'm going to select the margin left so that we can add a little bit here, which will be 2.5 rem. Just like so. And we will have a little bit of overflow here, but that's going to be an easy fix. So for that, we can just go back to the footer right here, and then footer, and then we'll say that the overflow X is going to be hidden, just like so, and that's going to get rid of the lines. And this is for the footer content with the justify content space between that we had before. Since we already have this margin, I guess we don't really need it. So if we comment it out, and then you'll see that we do this. And let me actually see footer content, justify content space between, footer content, and here. Oh, but that's mostly because we have the already width right here. So let's actually not worry about it. Let's just keep doing it because we don't need it. Let me just get rid of it. And then I'll just keep the margin. And this is going to be it for the first breakpoint. Let me just put this elsewhere, else it's going to keep highlighting the footer that we have right here, which is kind of annoying. Then the next breakpoint that we want to take care of, let me actually just grab this, save myself a little bit of time. And then I'll paste it down below. And now the next breakpoint is going to be at 1000 pixels. And we're going to have to make this slightly bigger again, just so that we can keep seeing the changes. And now you see that it takes effect. This is where the align self to the flex star comes in. As you can see, once we have plenty of room, this is going to expand. So here you see that they're both the same size, but it's still at the top, which is exactly what we want so that it stays at the head of the traveler. So I think that's good for like 1000 pixels, but we're going to have to double check once we start with the styles. And what I have to do here is select all the sections, and I'm going to increase the padding. So I'm going to select all the sections, which is going to be part of the global styles. And I'm going to say not, because I don't want these styles to be applied to the book section. And it's actually not there, it should be inside of parentheses, book section. So it's going to be for the booking. And then I'm just going to increase the padding to 10 rem. And then I'm going to say that the left and right is going to be 0. Now again, we'll do the comments for the header styles. And give myself a little bit more room to work with. Here, I'm going to select the hamburger menu, and I'm going to give it a display of none because at this point, we don't want to see it anymore. We want to have the regular navigation. So hamburger menu display will be set to none, just like so. Now, what we want to do is select the nav list. And we'll say that the position is going to be set to its initial state. Then we also want to reset the width by saying initial. The height is going to be initial as well. Then the background color is going to become transparent. Again, we are resetting everything we did for the mobile so that we can have the desktop version navigation, or for bigger screens, I should say. And now we'll change the flex direction to be of row. Then I'm going to justify the content, and I'm going to be setting it back to initial as well. Then the opacity, I'm going to turn it back on to its initial state of 1, and then the transform scale X, and or I think I did it just the scale in general. I'm going to turn it back on, and just like so, you can already see that the navigation is in place. What I'm going to do now is apply some margin right to every single nav item except for the last one. Again, for that we'll use the not, and that's going to be pretty simple. So nav item, and then we'll say not, and then last child, which is going to be the last one. And here, what we want to do is apply a margin right of 3 rem. Then I'm going to say that the margin bottom that we applied before is going to be 0, just like so. So now it's perfectly aligned in the middle. Then what I'll do is select the nav link, and I'm going to make the font size 1.3 rem. Then I'm going to say that the font size is going to be back to normal. Not font size, but font weight. And finally, I'm going to transition the color because we will also have a hover effect. Again, nav link, and then we'll say on hover, we want the color to be the yellow, just like so. So now when we hover over them, you see that it has a nice transition into the yellow. What I'll do now is select the title once more. So let's create another. Actually, I guess I'll just stop being lazy and type it in myself. So hero section styles. So now we'll take the title and we will make it even bigger. So the font size, let's actually scroll all the way back up so that you can see the changes. So font size is going to be 12 rem. Then the subtitle is going to be increased as well. That's going to be 4.6. And it should be the font size, of course. Just like so. Then we will target the booking section styles. So this would be this one right here. And we want to make some changes. So booking section. Actually, before we do that, let's create a comment. And what what we want to do here is pretty simple. We will target the form. And then we'll make it so that it has a display of flex, because we want to play around with the items here in a row as opposed to a column as it was before. Once I do that, I want to justify the content space between so that I can have some additional separation here. Then what I'll be doing is selecting the input group, and I'm going to get rid of the margin bottom that I had from before. So book form, and then input group. Because remember, we have other additional input groups, so that we want to make sure that we only select the ones inside of the form. So I'm going to set the margin bottom to be 0. Then I'm going to select the booking form again, and I'm going to select the input group first child. Which is going to be this one right here for the destination. And then here I'll just use the shorthand of flex once more. And I'm going to make this slightly bigger at 20%, just like so. Then I'm going to select the input and the options. And I'm going to give it a minimum width. So the minimum width that they will always have at all times should be 10 rem or greater. Just like so. So now you see that everything looks a lot better. Then the next thing that I want to do is play around with some of the rooms section. So let's actually create a comment. And what we will be doing is actually, let me scroll down to the rooms so that we can actually see them. And I know you can see like a lot more rooms than you did before, but that's because after I filmed the HTML for the last section that we did this, I decided to actually put them back in, but it's going to be exactly the same. You shouldn't really be concerned about it. Even though in the other one, I only had 4. So here, what I want to do is select the rooms grid. And then the grid template columns, I'm going to slightly modify it. So it's going to be still the same functions that we did before, autofit, and then the min-max. And then here, this is where things change slightly. So now it's going to be 40 rem, and then for the minimum, and then for the maximum, it's going to be 1 fraction, just like so. So now you notice how the layout changes if I comment this out. So at first we have 3, and now it's bigger, so we only get 2. And then I'm also going to modify the grid gap a little bit more. Grid gap, and it's going to be 8 rem, just like so. Something else that I want to do here is target the features room and featured rooms. And what I want to do here is change the flex direction to be of row. And now you see that we have them side by side. Then what I'll do here is align items to the flex start. So it's going to move all this text right here to the top of the image, right here, starting line. So align items, and then I'll set it to flex start, just like so. And it's going to move it up. Now I'm going to select the room info wrap, which is this one. And I just want to create a little bit of separation here between the image and the text. So that's going to have a margin left of 1.5 rem, just like so. And that's going to be it for this breakpoint. The next breakpoint is going to be at 1200 pixels. And this is going to be pretty simple because we will just be targeting the input group once more, which is going to be this one. So let me just make this bigger so that we can actually see the changes. Then let me just resize this as well. So the last breakpoint, as I mentioned, is going to be at 1200 pixels. So let's just grab that first portion. And then let's not forget to add the closing curly brace. And then we'll just change this to 1200. And what I want to do here, actually, this time I'm actually going to be lazy. So let me just go back up. And then I'll grab this right here because it's the only thing we will be modifying. And then I want to make this slightly bigger at 30% since we have more room to work with. And with that, this project is fully completed. So now you see that if we go back to the top, everything works. We get the big header section here. When we scroll it, everything shrinks and we get the solid color. The buttons also have the nice effect here as well. And then this one, this section looks good also. This as well. And then here we have the contact form with the line effects. And finally the footer. And just as the last demo, let me just go inside of the responsive mode and make this smaller just so that you see that it's fully responsive. So again, if you guys found this video useful, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. And if you still haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications. Again, if you want to check out my Patreon, please do so. There's some extra perks there if you become a Patreon, and check out my Instagram. All the links will be in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.